a British safecracker, convicted criminal, and professional conman, receives the Iron Cross from Nazi Germany for acts of sabotage against Britain, whilst simultaneously working for British intelligence and feeding the Germans completely fabricated information. Eddie Chapman, codename Zigzag, pulled off something intelligence agencies thought impossible. He made the Abwehr trust him more than they trusted their own generals' assessments. Hitler's spy chiefs believed Chapman's lies when they doubted their own reconnaissance photographs. They paid him a fortune in cash, awarded him medals, and planned entire operations around his false intelligence. Meanwhile, MI5 was feeding him exactly what to say, turning him into a weapon of mass deception. This is the story of the most audacious double-cross in World War II, a criminal who became so brilliant at lying that he changed the course of the war whilst getting rich off both sides. He fooled the Nazis for 3 years, contributed to D-Day's success, and somehow survived to tell the tale. How does a man with no loyalty to anyone become the spy both sides trusted most? Let's wind back to 1939. Eddie Chapman is 34 years old and sitting in a Jersey prison cell, serving time for safe cracking. Not his first conviction, absolutely won't be his last, except it might be, because the war's just started and he's trapped on this tiny Channel Island with nowhere to run. Chapman isn't your typical criminal thug. He's intelligent, methodical, charming when it suits him. He learned explosives handling in the British Army before going freelance, pulling jobs across London with a crew called the Jelly Gang, named after the gelignite they used to blow safes open. He was genuinely good at it too, technically skilled, until he got caught trying to crack a safe in Jersey, and the local magistrate wasn't buying his considerable charm. Then June 1940 happens. The Germans invade the Channel Islands, the only British territory they'll occupy during the entire war. Suddenly, Chapman's prison has new management wearing Wehrmacht uniforms, and everything changes. Most prisoners would keep their heads down, serve their time quietly, hope to survive the occupation. Chapman does the exact opposite. He volunteers to work for German intelligence. Think about the audacity of that decision. He's in a British prison, the Germans have just arrived, and he's essentially saying, "I'll betray my country for you." But think about it from the German perspective too. They've just occupied these islands. They're planning to invade Britain, and they desperately need agents who can operate on English soil without raising immediate suspicion. Who better than an Englishman who already hates the British establishment enough to rob it systematically? Chapman speaks perfect English, obviously, knows the criminal underworld intimately, understands how to move through British society without attracting police attention, and he's offering his services voluntarily. He's got skills they need, explosives expertise, nerves under pressure, and most critically, he's already proven he doesn't respect British law. The Abwehr recruitment protocols typically focused on ideological sympathizers, fascists, nationalists, people with political axes to grind. Chapman was something different entirely. He was purely mercenary. He wanted money, freedom, adventure, and he didn't particularly care which flag he served under to get them. The Abwehr station chief in France, a Wehrmacht officer named Stefan von Groening, saw potential in that moral flexibility. Chapman was a professional con artist, which meant he was already trained in deception, manipulation, reading people, and thinking on his feet under pressure. So they took him up on it. They pulled Chapman out of Jersey prison in 1941 and shipped him to occupied France for training. He was about to enter the strangest finishing school in Europe, a place where they taught you how to blow up factories, operate secret radios, and live under false identity without cracking under interrogation. Chapman was finally getting the education his talents deserved. The Germans just had no idea who they were really training. The Abwehr training facility in Nantes, France, is where Chapman transforms from talented criminal into professional saboteur. They teach him explosives, specifically how to destroy aircraft factories without killing himself in the process, radio operation and Morse code, how to mix invisible ink solutions for secret messages, photography with miniature cameras, how to construct and maintain false identities. It's essentially a vocational school for spies, and Chapman is their star pupil. He's a natural at this. The explosives work, builds directly on his safe-cracking experience. He already understands detonators, timing devices, blast patterns. The deception aspects? He's been conning people his entire adult life. Reading targets, adjusting his story on the fly, maintaining complex lies under pressure. These are skills he's honed through years of criminal work. The Germans are genuinely impressed, particularly his handler von Groening. Von Groening isn't what you'd expect from a Nazi intelligence officer. He's a professional, not an ideological zealot. He treats Chapman with unexpected decency, almost friendship. They drink together, discuss literature and philosophy, talk about life beyond the war. This relationship becomes critically important later, but right now it's just unusual. A German officer and British criminal developing genuine mutual respect across enemy lines. By late 1942, Chapman is ready for deployment. His mission is straightforward on paper, suicidal in practice. Parachute into England, sabotage the de Havilland aircraft factory in Hatfield where they're building mosquito bombers, then radio back confirmation before committing additional sabotage operations and feeding intelligence back to Germany. 16th of December, 1942. Chapman jumps from a German aircraft over Cambridgeshire in the middle of a freezing night. His parachute deploys. He hits English soil for the first time in over 2 years, and now comes the moment everything depends on. He walks straight to the nearest village and surrenders to the local police. Chapman tells the stunned constable he's a German spy and needs to speak with MI5 immediately. The officer apparently thinks he's either drunk or insane until Chapman produces German money, forged identity documents, and his radio equipment. Within hours, MI5 officers arrive from London and whisk Chapman away for interrogation. They grill him for days. Is Chapman genuine, or is this an elaborate German trick? Is he a triple agent sent to infiltrate British intelligence itself? The interrogators push him on every detail: his training, his mission parameters, his motivations, his relationship with von Groening. They're looking for inconsistencies, tells, anything that suggests he's playing them. Chapman tells them absolutely everything. Every detail of his training, the technical specifications of his equipment, the communication codes, von Groening's habits, the internal politics of the Abwehr station in France. He holds nothing back. And then he makes his pitch. Let me work for you. I can feed the Germans false information. They trust me completely. They think I'm their man inside Britain. I can be your weapon instead. MI5 faces an excruciating dilemma. If Chapman's genuine, he's potentially the most valuable asset they could possibly have. A German agent they control completely, trusted by the Abwehr, positioned to feed false intelligence directly into Hitler's war machine. But if he's not genuine, if this is a German operation, they're about to hand the enemy exactly what they want: penetration of British intelligence, insight into their counter-espionage methods, and the ability to compromise their entire defensive network. The risk is absolutely enormous, but so is the potential reward. They decide to take the gamble, and Eddie Chapman becomes Agent Zigzag. Chapman enters the double-cross system, the XX Committee, literally meaning double cross, Britain's program to control every German agent operating in the UK and feed them false information. It's one of the war's best-kept secrets, and Chapman is about to become one of its most successful players. They give him the codename Zigzag. It's absolutely perfect. Constantly switching directions, unpredictable, impossible to pin down. That's Chapman in a nutshell. Now comes the genuinely brilliant part. Chapman's mission is to blow up the de Havilland factory. MI5 decides to do exactly that. Well, make the Germans think they did. They bring in specialists from the camouflage unit, engineers, and explosives experts. The job is to make the de Havilland factory look utterly destroyed, without actually stopping mosquito production for even a single day. They use real explosives in carefully controlled detonations to create authentic blast damage in non-critical areas of the facility. They paint massive scorch marks across the roof panels. They scatter debris artistically across the grounds. They even destroy a transformer station to cut electrical power temporarily, creating the appearance of catastrophic damage that's crippled production capacity. The operation takes weeks to prepare and requires extraordinary coordination. MI5 works with factory management, RAF camouflage specialists, and demolition experts. Every detail has to be perfect because they know the Germans will send reconnaissance aircraft to photograph the damage from high altitude. The deception needs to survive aerial scrutiny by trained intelligence analysts studying the photographs. 29th of January, 1943. Chapman radios back to Germany using his assigned codes. Mission accomplished. The factory is destroyed. Mosquito production has completely stopped. He provides specific details about the blast pattern, the damage to critical machinery, the chaos among workers and management. The Germans immediately dispatch a Luftwaffe reconnaissance flight over Hatfield to verify his claims. They photograph the factory from several thousand feet. The images show exactly what Chapman described: extensive structural damage, production areas apparently devastated, the facility clearly out of action. The Abwehr is absolutely ecstatic. They've successfully sabotaged British aircraft production. Chapman is a bloody hero. Von Groening personally commends him in communications back to Berlin. German intelligence files mark Chapman as exceptionally reliable and highly valuable. Senior Abwehr officers are celebrating their greatest intelligence success in Britain since the war began. Meanwhile, inside that supposedly devastated factory, production continues without interruption. The damage is entirely superficial, carefully designed to look catastrophic from the air whilst leaving all critical systems completely functional. Mosquito bombers keep rolling off the assembly line at normal pace. Workers are slightly bemused by the theatrical destruction around them, but they're building aircraft just like yesterday. The Germans have absolutely no idea. This is the moment Chapman proves his extraordinary value to both sides simultaneously. The Germans think he's their most successful agent operating in Britain. MI5 knows he's their most convincing liar. He's just executed one of the most elaborate deceptions of the entire war, and it's only his opening act. Chapman gets extracted back to German-occupied Europe in mid-1943 for debriefing and new mission planning. Now he has to convince the Germans face-to-face that he's completely loyal while secretly remaining Britain's man inside their intelligence service. The acting performance is about to get significantly more difficult, and the stakes are about to get dramatically higher. Chapman returns to German-occupied territory in March 1943, and the reception is extraordinary. The Abwehr throws actual parties celebrating their sabotage hero. Senior officers who've never met him want to shake his hand. Then they award him the Iron Cross, exceptionally rare for a non-German, virtually unheard of for a foreigner working in intelligence operations. Think about the sheer absurdity of this moment. A British criminal is wearing a Nazi medal for successfully sabotaging his own country, whilst actually working for British intelligence and having faked the entire operation. Chapman later admitted the irony wasn't remotely lost on him, but he played the role flawlessly, accepting the honour with appropriate humility and pride. The Germans station him in Oslo, Norway. He's living in genuine luxury now, comfortable flat, plenty of money, considerable freedom of movement. He starts a relationship with a Norwegian woman named Dagmar Lahlum, who believes she's dating Fritz Graumann, successful German agent and sabotage expert. She has absolutely no idea she's sleeping with a British double agent who's lying about literally everything, including his name. But Chapman hasn't gone rogue. He's still working for Britain, which means maintaining covert radio contact with MI5 without the Germans discovering it. This is the absolute nightmare of double agent work. You're constantly performing, constantly calculating what information helps Britain whilst appearing to serve Germany faithfully, constantly aware that one mistake means execution. Chapman uses coded messages hidden inside apparently routine communications. He'll include specific phrases or unusual word patterns that mean entirely different things to British handlers than they appear to mean to German officers monitoring the same transmissions. It's linguistic tightrope walking, and one slip sends you plummeting. Von Groening remains his strongest advocate within the Abwehr. Their relationship has evolved beyond simple handler and agent. They genuinely like each other, discuss personal matters, trust each other's judgment. Von Groening's trust gives Chapman institutional protection when other German intelligence officers raise awkward questions. And there are questions. Some Abwehr analysts are suspicious. Why would a British criminal be so extraordinarily loyal to Germany? Why has British counterintelligence never caught him despite multiple missions? Isn't it remarkably convenient that his sabotage operations succeed perfectly without him ever facing capture? The mathematics of his success rate seems statistically improbable. But von Groening vouches for him every single time. Chapman's Iron Cross gives him credibility that's difficult to challenge. The reconnaissance photographs of the destroyed factory are physical evidence that's impossible to dismiss. The Abwehr desperately wants to believe they have a super agent operating freely in Britain, so they actively dismiss the doubts. Confirmation bias is a powerful thing, especially in intelligence work where success stories are rare. By late 1943, German planning for Chapman intensifies. They're preparing his next mission: return to Britain and gather intelligence on Allied invasion preparations. They want information about troop concentrations, equipment staging areas, anything that might reveal where and when the invasion of France will happen. This mission is dramatically more dangerous than the factory job. Chapman will be parachuting back into Britain whilst the entire country is on maximum alert for German spies. Security is suffocating. Everyone's paranoid. Counterintelligence is everywhere. One wrong word to the wrong person means arrest. And this time, MI5 needs him to do something far more complex than fake sabotage. They need him to feed the Germans false intelligence about the invasion itself, contributing to the massive deception operation that will determine whether D-Day succeeds or fails catastrophically. Thousands of Allied soldiers' lives will depend on whether Chapman can lie convincingly enough. June 1944. Chapman parachutes back into England for what will become the most critical mission of his entire espionage career. The timing is absolutely no coincidence. D-Day is approaching rapidly, and the Allies desperately need every German division staring in the wrong direction when the invasion begins. Chapman becomes an active component of Operation Fortitude, the massive deception plan designed to convince Hitler that the invasion will strike Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy. This is intelligence warfare at its most critical. Get it wrong, and thousands of soldiers die on French beaches. Get it right, and you save lives whilst crippling German defensive response. Chapman's specific job is straightforward but vital. Report fictional Allied troop movements in southeast England, suggest preparations for a Calais crossing, and confirm what other double agents are simultaneously reporting. He needs to make the Germans believe an entire phantom army, Patton's fictional 1st US Army Group, is preparing to launch the main invasion at Calais, making Normandy look like a diversion. He radios back meticulously detailed reports: massive American troop concentrations gathering in Kent, tank divisions staging near Dover, landing craft massing in Thames estuary, fuel dumps being established. All of it carefully crafted lies that MI5 constructs and feeds him to transmit convincingly. The Germans don't just believe him, they prioritize his intelligence. Decrypted German communications show Chapman's reports being sent directly to Hitler's headquarters. Wehrmacht planning documents from June 1944 explicitly reference Chapman's intelligence when discussing Allied invasion preparations. His information is reaching the absolute top of German command and influencing their strategic decisions. The Germans believe him completely. More critically, Hitler believes him. When the actual D-Day landings explode across Normandy beaches on 6th of June, Hitler keeps entire panzer divisions near Calais for weeks because accumulated intelligence, including Chapman's fabricated reports, insists the Normandy attack is merely a feint. The real invasion, they're convinced, is still coming at Calais, where Patton's Phantom Army is supposedly waiting. It never comes. Those German armoured divisions sit uselessly idle whilst Allied forces establish and expand the Normandy beachhead. Chapman's false intelligence, woven into the broader Fortitude tapestry, arguably saves thousands of Allied lives by keeping critical German reinforcements away from the actual invasion sector during the most vulnerable period. Think about the psychological pressure Chapman is operating under during this period. He knows real soldiers are landing on real beaches under real machine gun fire. If the Germans discover the deception, if they realize he's systematically lying, they immediately redeploy those idle divisions to Normandy, and the invasion could fail spectacularly. Thousands die, possibly altering the war's entire outcome, and it's partially his fault. Chapman has to maintain his cover absolutely perfectly. One suspicious transmission, one inconsistent detail in his reports, and German analysts might realize they're being comprehensively played. There are genuinely close calls. German intelligence dispatches officers to cross-reference his information through other sources. They compare his reports with reconnaissance flights and other agents' intelligence. They're checking his work constantly, looking for the inconsistency that reveals the deception. Every time, Chapman's lies hold up because MI5 has orchestrated the entire operation so meticulously that every piece of false information interlocks perfectly with every other piece. By August 1944, reality becomes unavoidable even for Hitler. There is no Calais invasion coming. The Germans finally accept that Normandy was the main event all along. But by then, it's catastrophically too late. The beachhead is absolutely secure, Allied armies are breaking out across France, and Hitler's Atlantic Wall has been decisively breached. Chapman has achieved the impossible. He helped fool the most paranoid military intelligence apparatus in history at the single most critical moment of the entire war. But the war isn't finished yet, and neither is Chapman's dangerous double life. As the war grinds through late 1944 and into early 1945, Chapman's operational value diminishes rapidly. The Germans are retreating on every front, their intelligence apparatus disintegrating under Allied pressure. Chapman makes his final transmissions to the Abwehr in early 1945, reporting fabricated information about non-existent V-2 rocket damage assessments and phantom troop movements that no longer matter strategically. Then, 8th May 1945. VE Day arrives. The war in Europe ends, and Chapman is suddenly just Eddie Chapman again. No longer Agent Zigzag, no longer Fritz Grauman, no longer anyone's secret weapon. Just a convicted criminal who happened to be one of Britain's most valuable intelligence assets for 3 extraordinary years. MI5's attitude toward Chapman post-war is deeply complicated. They're genuinely grateful. His work contributed significantly to D-Day's success, saved Allied lives, damaged German intelligence operations. But they fundamentally don't trust him. He's a career criminal, purely mercenary, utterly unpredictable. They debrief him exhaustively, make him sign the Official Secrets Act with stern warnings about consequences, and essentially tell him to disappear quietly into normal civilian life. Chapman spectacularly doesn't do quiet. By the early 1950s, he's selling his story to newspapers, writing memoirs, appearing on television programs, all whilst MI5 is frantically trying to suppress the information because the double-cross system is still classified. They prosecute him for Official Secrets Act violations. He fights back through media and courts. It becomes an embarrassing public mess for British intelligence. His 1954 memoir gets published in heavily censored form with massive sections redacted by government order. The full uncensored version doesn't appear until the 1970s, when intelligence files finally begin declassification under the 30-year rule. And here's the genuinely remarkable part. Chapman returns to crime periodically throughout the 1950s and 60s. He's involved in various schemes, serves additional prison time for fraud, apparently can't stay straight despite his wartime heroics. The man who helped win the war against Nazi Germany goes back to robbing and scheming. Once a criminal, seemingly always a criminal, regardless of what history demanded from you temporarily. What happened to von Groening? He survived the war, lived quietly in post-war Germany, and apparently never learned Chapman had systematically betrayed him until decades later, when British intelligence files were declassified and the full story emerged publicly. Some accounts suggest he felt personally wounded, not by the espionage itself, which he understood as professional duty, but by the fact their friendship had been at least partially performance and manipulation. Chapman died in December 1997 at 83 years old. By then, his story had been completely declassified, files released, official histories written. Military historians credited him as one of the most successful double agents in espionage history. The de Havilland deception, his D-Day intelligence contributions, all of it confirmed and documented through released government files and German records captured after the war. So what actually was Eddie Chapman? Hero defending Britain? Criminal serving only himself? Opportunistic con man who happened to pick the right side? Patriot despite his motivations? He was probably all those things simultaneously, and none of them completely. He was a man with extraordinarily flexible morals who found himself in exceptional circumstances and played both sides with genuine brilliance. He saved lives through systematic deception, got wealthy doing it, and somehow survived when probability said he should have been executed by one side or the other. The ultimate con artist pulled off the greatest con of the Second World War and got away with it entirely. Section 8. So how did a criminal safe-cracker fool Nazi intelligence for 3 consecutive years? How did Hitler's spy chiefs trust Eddie Chapman more than their own generals' battlefield assessments? Let's break down the psychology and tradecraft that made this seemingly impossible story actually work. First, confirmation bias is devastatingly real, especially in intelligence work. The Germans desperately wanted to have a successful agent operating freely inside Britain. They'd lost virtually their entire spy network by 1942. MI5 had systematically captured or turned nearly everyone. Chapman appeared to be the glorious exception, the proof their intelligence operations could still succeed against British counter-espionage. When people desperately want to believe something, they interpret ambiguous evidence to confirm that belief and dismiss contradictory signals as anomalies. Second, Chapman's criminal background was paradoxically his greatest operational asset. Ideological agents have tells. They're emotionally invested, sometimes internally conflicted about betraying their country. Chapman had absolutely no ideology whatsoever. He was purely mercenary, which made him utterly convincing because he had no deeper loyalty to fake or hide. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a criminal working for whoever paid him best. The Germans could believe that completely because it was fundamentally true, just not in the direction they assumed. Third, von Groening's personal vouching provided crucial institutional protection within Abwehr bureaucracy. Intelligence agencies are ultimately bureaucracies where internal politics matter enormously. Von Groening staked his professional reputation on Chapman's reliability. When other officers raised legitimate suspicions, von Groening's credibility became Chapman's shield. The Germans would have had to admit their experienced officer made a catastrophic judgment error. Psychologically easier to believe Chapman was genuine than accept that humiliation. Fourth, Chapman was professionally trained in deception long before becoming a spy. Successful con artists are essentially method actors who understand human psychology instinctively. Chapman had spent years reading marks, adjusting his performance in real time, maintaining complex fabrications under sustained pressure. Those skills transferred directly and powerfully to espionage work. He wasn't learning deception from scratch. He was applying mastered skills to a new context. Compare Chapman to other successful double agents like Juan Pujol Garcia, Agent Garbo, or Dusko Popov, Agent Tricycle. Most were ideologically motivated anti-fascists who volunteered specifically to work against Germany. Chapman was unique as a purely mercenary double agent with no political convictions whatsoever. That made him unpredictable and difficult for handlers to manage, but also made him utterly convincing in his performance because his selfishness was completely genuine. Fifth, the double-cross system was brilliantly architected. MI5 didn't just control Chapman individually, they controlled the entire intelligence context he operated within. They could verify his lies with physical evidence like the fake factory damage. They coordinated his reports with other controlled agents, so everything interlocked perfectly. They ensured every piece of Chapman's intelligence fit into a larger, credible picture. Chapman was one instrument in a perfectly orchestrated deception symphony. Why did Hitler trust Chapman over his own generals? Because Chapman told Hitler what he wanted to hear: that German intelligence was succeeding, that Allied plans were discoverable, that Germany still possessed strategic advantages. Generals delivered uncomfortable truths about Germany's deteriorating military position. Chapman's lies were psychologically more palatable than reality, so they were believed preferentially. Modern intelligence agencies still study Chapman's operation extensively. The principles remain timelessly relevant. Deception works best when it confirms existing beliefs, when it's supported by verifiable physical evidence, and when the target desperately wants to believe it. Chapman didn't just lie skillfully. He understood intuitively what lies would be most believable and most strategically useful simultaneously. The moral complexity remains genuinely fascinating. Chapman was no hero in any traditional sense. He was motivated entirely by money, self-preservation, and adventure, not patriotism, ideology, or moral conviction. Yet his actions directly saved thousands of Allied lives during D-Day and contributed significantly to defeating Nazi Germany. Can you be a hero with completely selfish motivations? Chapman's story suggests perhaps intentions matter less than results when history is written. He was the right criminal in the right place at the right time, and he played the part with absolute brilliance.